Friends, thank you for tuning in. This is HeyGirl, the space where we empower and inspire women to find their flow. Powered by One2Gration and specially curated for the women of Flow with Ease. I am your host, Cameron, aka Mama's Day Slang. Let's get this flow going. Welcome to this episode of HeyGirl.
Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to HeyGirl, where we speak it, live it, and manifest it. I'm your host, Cameron McKinney, and I'm a little under the weather today, so just bear with me. But joining me today, we have Dr. Rhonda Thompson, who's a speaker, a self-mastery coach, a professor of psychology who's really on a mission to guide women towards achieving their best self-mastery and excellence. Welcome, Dr. Thompson. I also want to welcome Miss Sky Gullett. She comes with a background in psychology and sociology. She's an entrepreneur and she's also a life coach and consultant. Very thrilled to have you ladies discuss the topic we're going to talk about today. Dr. Rhonda, I want you to just kind of jump in and give us a little bit of your background today.
Certainly. Thank you, Sky. I'm so happy to be on here with you today. I am the CEO and founder of Harris Thompson Masteries, LLC, and I utilize this platform as a coaching program so that I can help people master the power within them. I've done a few things in life. I've served as a mentor, an entrepreneur. I've also served as a military officer. And on the other side of that, I've been a military spouse. I've had many things that I've been able to do to interact with people and then explore how those transitions in life can cause gaps that we need to fill. And that's basically what my toolkit is for. I've designed it to have 8 essential tools to help people master their power.
Awesome. Welcome, Sky.
As I mentioned earlier, Cameron, I see why you have Dr. Thompson and I on here. We have a lot of alignment in what we do and our interests and passions and how we help people. I actually teach my life coaching course is in mastering mindfulness. It's called Give Up to Glow Up, where it's 90 days to mastering mindfulness. We do that in 3 different parts: past, present, and future. And our objective is to not have you completely master mindfulness in 90 days, but to at least get you started and equipped with the right tools to do so. Our objective is to go from patterns of pain to systems of success, because most of our decisions and behavior is actually trauma informed, and we don't really know that. And so it's hard to resolve a problem that you can't identify. Our objective is to master the mindfulness first, and then equip you with the tools to do that continuously. Both let go of the past so that you can be in this gift of right now called the present, and then be able to make decisions and plan for and prepare for the future without being overwhelmed by the uncertainty of it. It's a little bit of what I do in my life coaching course. I also have a background in personal training. I've been an athlete my whole life, so I use a lot of athlete metaphors myself. I also have many other different fields and things that I've dabbled into myself, from serving to sales to you name it. I've probably been in it or close to it. I can also relate to you there, Dr. Thompson.
You're just a well individual, right? Both of you have a lot going on, have done a lot. You come with a wealth of knowledge to this platform. You mentioned something just a minute ago. Like, when people focus too much on the past, they say it leads to depression. When they think too much about the future, it leads to anxiety, right? Just having that center, that calmness, where you're focused on the now, really helps us with our daily stressors, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about mastering calm and coherency while actually managing the daily stressors of life and relationships, which I think all of us can attest to, that especially in the last 3 years, we've dealt with some type of stress related to a lot of stuff, COVID, etc. Dr. Thompson, can you kind of talk about some of your mastery skills that you've developed to help us deal with stress?
Sure. I love that Sky mentioned this generational effect that we have, because I wanted to mention how we think about relationships. One of my tools is called the relationship meter. And we utilize that tool to gauge the impact of relationships. Sometimes we're attached to people, we're attached to associates, we even have some family members sometimes, and we need to gauge how those relationships are actually impacting the individual, because we think about the individual as the center point, and then you have those most significant relationships, you have those that are just significant, and then you have those that are insignificant. We need to think about our circle, put everyone in their appropriate place, and then I ask people to gauge it on 1 to 5. When you're interacting with someone, sometimes we overreact, or we think that the importance of that interaction is going to play a major role in how we feel, change our emotions, change our mood. And if we get used to doing that gauging, well, my interaction with her doesn't really impact my life. It's not going to impact my income, the way I live. It's not going to impact my children. We may give that a 1. Then we ease ourselves with the expectation that they're going to behave the way that we want them to behave. And then you allow people to be themselves without having those impacts right on a daily basis. So I would say that's something that everyone can do just on a daily basis. Gauging that 1 to 5, how important is it in terms of impact, and then interacting appropriately so that you reduce that stress.
That's good. Sorry. I feel like I need that with my kids, because sometimes just the little things, I'm like, I blow it out of proportion, right? And I'm like, how big of an impact is this going to be 10 minutes from now? So I think we can all utilize those strategies and put things in a certain box that we're not allowed to get too stressed out. Did you have any comments, Guy?
I have a very interesting standpoint on this age of self-love. My perspective perhaps is a little bit different than what I see or consume, or perhaps is around me in social media or even in common knowledge. I think while a lot of our struggle is around self-love, it probably is from relational damage. Most cases, how we see ourselves is impacted in the early stages of life in childhood. Childhood development is something that I really have a passion for, because children are my passion. And so relationships end up by default being a passion, because it just informs so much of a child's perspective of life and how to engage with the world and interact with it. And the relational trauma that we may experience early on, or even if they're not traumatic, you could just say the relational experiences that we have early on in childhood inform so many images of ourselves, which is why divorce is so hard on children, which is why attachment styles affect us in adulthood. Even though it's a self-love issue, it probably is because of a relational trauma. And then once you develop in the self-love, let's say you come to a good place where you feel healed and you feel healthy and you feel whole, well, then what? And then how do you really know that it works, that the self-love actually is foolproof?
Right.
You have to really test it in a relationship, I think. You'll be able to tell how well that self-love actually was implemented, or how much it deeply rooted itself into you based off of how you interact in your relationships now. So whether that's parental or platonic or romantic, the relationships will be the testing ground for your self-love to see if it actually worked.
Absolutely.
You talked about the self-love and being mindful of yourself. That certainly provides a layer of protection, helps you with some resilience. But as she was saying, you have to test it, because even if you add in that layer of self-care and self-love, if you don't have the relationship skills that allow you to interact differently, feel great about yourself, but you don't know how maybe to receive care and love from someone else, then you may not know how to give it to someone else. You may know how to do very well for yourself, but thinking about what that looks like and making sure that you have the not only the experiences, but the knowledge to be able to make those changes, I think is wonderful.
Right. And the fact that we all have a foundation, I'm so sorry. The fact that we all have a foundation in our family, whether we were raised by our grandmother or our parents or whoever, all of our families speak a different language, right? So some people come from families where it's abuse and there's not much love, but we all have that foundation. And learning, I am so sorry, learning how to set the foundation, even if it wasn't a strong one growing up, learning how to set the foundation to build stronger things on top of that is really important as we get older and start to get into adulthood and have families ourselves. Just working on the foundation that you already have. So that's important. This voice of mine. We talked about the one technique that you can use. Do you have any other techniques to manage self mastery?
Certainly. We were talking about stress. I'll give a couple of points about managing stress. And sometimes people think they manage stress very well, but we have a portion of the population who just have an inherited stress tolerance. And these people usually are very calm under pressure. Stressful situations don't seem to make them feel like things are chaotic. But we have another side of that where we have people who don't deal with stress very well. They're usually going to avoid confrontation. They're not going to resolve a conflict. And we want them to understand you can actually gain tools to actually manage stress in a better way, because we know that stress affects us physically as well as mentally. And that's going to show up. And I'm sure we'll get to that. We'll talk about what that looks like. But I want to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of those things that you don't hear about a lot. You might hear exercise, self-care, meditation. But forgiveness is one thing that can help to reduce stress in someone's life, because holding grudges actually wastes energy, and it robs you of the ability to just move past things. I know that Sky's probably got something, but I like to always add that one because we don't hear about it as often.
For sure.
That's really good. Nelson Mandela said, I believe it was Nelson Mandela. He said, racism is, or hatred. Hatred is like drinking poison and expecting it to kill someone else. And I think the same is for unforgiveness. It's like drinking a poison and expecting it to, that grudge is like expecting it to kill somebody else, but really it's destroying you from the inside out. I think that's a great point. There are several things that come to mind for coping mechanisms. First is just breathing. I always, to the best of your abilities, if you can have the clarity to just take a deep breath before you respond to something, take a moment to kind of ground yourself. The second thing actually comes from playing volleyball. When we had a sports psychologist come in and talk to our team, I'm a recovering perfectionist, y'all. I have to maintain the ways to overcome my perfectionism. I spend a lot of time, because I'm so cerebral and thinking and so calculated and analytical, I spend so much time in my head, and volleyball is a very fast sport. By the time you consider one thing, the next thing is happening. And the average play is like 2.3 seconds. You don't have time to worry about the last point or the next point. You just need to be in the right now. Something that he showed us was actually tapping ourselves, slapping my thighs, hitting my shoulder, clapping my hands, doing something on the court to bring me back to the physical world and not spend so much time in my head. And I think that could be helpful. There's several methods of tap therapy, sound therapy, to kind of get you grounded and out of your head. But doing a snap or a tap of some sort, clicking your fingers, touching them, counting while you touch them, things of that nature can also be really good for like a right now, grounding yourself with coping and stress. And then the last two things, one is actually expecting it, anticipating stress and expecting it to happen in certain situations so that you already have, it doesn't catch you off guard. You're already prepared for stress to happen at some point during the day. And then having a method of what you're going to do once you meet that expectation of stress. Then it's not, your heartbeat starts to raise and you're like, oh, I expected that. I know what to do with that. And then last, I'm really tapping through these kind of fast. If you want to unpack these a little bit more, I'm happy to do so. But just for the sake of time and giving Dr. Thompson more room to speak as well. The last one that comes to mind is just changing your perspective on stress. There's been one study in particular that I know was done over a length of time, and I can't remember who it is exactly. But they talked about stress, changing the perspective of stress from two different control groups. Without getting too deep into the science and how the control groups and things of that worked. One group was told to respond to stress regularly, and the other group was told that stress was good for you, that it meant that things like you cared about it, or that your heartbeat rate meant that you were about to go into something exciting or something good for you. Because the reality is, one person on the roller coaster is having the time of their life while the other person is on the brink of death. But they're both on the same roller coaster. You can just change the perspective or start to look at it from a different viewpoint of, this stress is good for me. This stress is healthy for me. It means I'm about to get ready. It means my body is preparing itself for something. My heartbeat is raising. It's excitement. It's exhilarating. It's anticipation of something that I care about, that I'm about to do well in. Then that can also help with coping with the stress from a more proactive standpoint.
Dr. Thompson, I listened
Yeah.
to one of your podcasts, The Coping Blueprint, and it said that withdrawing, acting annoyed are things that some of us do to cope with our feelings. You were talking to me, but it also says, it talks about owning your feelings and owning like your emotions and how you feel and how it's okay to feel stress. It's okay to feel anger, but it's all about how you respond to it, as Sky was saying. And you made a really good comment. You said pebbles can grow into a boulder of stress. It pretty much talks about how something so small can grow into something really big if we make it like that. But we don't.
That's correct.
I thought that was like a great analogy.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you picked that up. And I
Yeah.
love that Sky offered.
Can grow into a boulder. Oh my God. Great analogy of how we can make the little things seem so big sometimes.
That's right. And listen, that boulder that's in the pit of your stomach is going to bother you until you do something about it. And I really like that Sky mentioned having good stress and bad stress. So when we say the word stress, we automatically think, well, that's something bad, because we usually hear someone say, well, they're stressed out, or that, that situation is going to stress whomever. But we do have good stress. Like she said, it might help you prepare. We want to have some stress, especially in a dangerous situation, because you want your body to get ready and react. We do have good stress, but that bad stress is when it shows up and it might cause physical reaction, body aches, muscle tension. Sometimes you might have digestive problems. You think it may be something that you ate. There's so many physical reactions that your body has when it's overstressed. You may even have sleep problems. And on more extended scale, sometimes people have what they feel like are panic attacks, but it could have been long-term stress that's showing up in their life, to include maybe some chest pains. We have to evaluate exactly what we're doing to our body. We want to make sure we're taking care of our body. And yes, making sure that we get rid of those little pebbles, because when you're trying to cope with relationships, coping with stress, you want to clear it out a little bit at a time. And sometimes that means that you're going to have to maybe have a conversation with someone. You may have to stop a bad habit. You may have to think about your surroundings, those little groups that you hang around. If you get in that group and you immediately feel like, hey, something's churning in here, I don't feel great. We have to figure out why we are picking those types of people and why we feel like we have to be connected to relationships, especially for those individuals who don't clap for you when you win. Are they still in your circle for a reason? We want to, I'm glad that we're combining this talk about coping, stress, and relationships, because I feel like we are all made for interactions and relationships. And sometimes the way that we navigate those relationships speaks a lot about our resilience and our ability to do it. We want to do it well.
Now, we're talking a lot about people who have access to therapists and these tools. What if you are in a marginalized environment or you don't have access to the different tools to use for stress? How do you deal with that? How do you teach people to cope who don't have access to therapy?
I'll let Sky talk and then I'll come back in.
Sure. I think a lot of the methods that I mentioned don't actually require a therapist. You could work on your breathing work. There's so much out there. You have to be mindful of what you consume, of course, and be sure that it's like peer reviewed. Not every blog post is factual. Not everything on the internet is factual, but there are several resources out there. There's plenty of books offered. There's plenty of podcasts like this that are offered at no charge to anybody, that you could pick up things like this and be able to apply them. I do think also just community, getting into it. TD Jake said that the only person in the room that I can't see is myself. So having people who can help pour wisdom into you, help see the things around you. And if you don't have access to that, I said a lot of the things that I mentioned before, different ways of tapping, different methods of breathing, getting outside is really good, making sure your basic needs are met. like being hydrated, getting good sleep. Sometimes you're stressed out because you just haven't had the proper food for your body or for your mind to thrive at its best. I think there are many other methods outside of therapy that could still be helpful. Of course, none of them may replace a licensed professional, but there are several options out there between books and podcasts, and then of course, like I said, nutritionally doing what's best for your body.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to add to that as well. So you have to be mindful of personality type. So sometimes if you've got a friend who says, well, this is what I'm doing and I'm feeling great, doesn't always work for you. So there are some things that you can do. And when I mentioned my relationship meters, we've got to be mindful. I always promote self-reflection and self-awareness. You have to know yourself so that you can then change some things. And then, like I said, master your power. But I would like for people to, some people like to write. They like a tactile option, making notes. And then also, if you want to put the notes in your phone, start thinking about your interactions, times when you feel stressed. And then also, like I said, 1 to 5, rating the impact of each interaction that you seem to get a little bit worked up about. Then you can also do that same 1 to 5 when you think about the relationships that you place a lot of emphasis on. You may feel like, well, I'm around this person on a daily basis. It can be at work, it can be at home in your social life. And for some reason or another, you seem to feel like you get worked up, you get upset, or you get stressed. Well, let's think about how important that relationship is. Do we need to change that? I think the first step to helping yourself is to then do the self-reflection and the awareness. You've got to then put some things down because we start moving, we get busy. Get busy with children, we get busy with work and with life, and we don't do the self-assessment. So do the self-assessment, and then some of these things that I've mentioned and that Sky have mentioned, I think will get people, give them a jump start to helping to create the calm that they're looking for.
Absolutely. I was listening to a podcast and they were saying we can use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule with our senses. Like 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can taste and or feel, and kind of go down from there. Just using our senses to gain awareness can help us out as well with all of our, when we're in a state of panic or whatever, or upset. So I thought that was a good strategy too. It's just the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There's so many coaches now too,
Yes.
coaches and resources and things of that nature, that there's a lot of accessibility. If you actually are looking for it, I'm sure you can find it.
Right. And also I was reading a book. It was called What's Wrong with You? Or What Happened to You? I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who are going through things, people are asking them, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you stressed? Or why are you acting like that? Instead of like, what happened to you? Instead of like, what are you going through? Or what have you been through in life to have you act the way you are now? Or are you in the state you are now based on what you've been through? I think just changing the narrative of that can help individuals too, because they don't feel like they're broken. What's wrong with you? I need to be fixed, which is not always the case.
I think another question is, people use it jokingly sometimes, but I do think it works, is who hurt you? Just asking, most of the time, I struggle with the whole self-love thing, I'll be honest, just because I think it's only part of the story and you'll miss the actual bigger picture if you just focus on self so much. But to some degree that you're able to, you only can respond to people in the way that, with your own eyes, with your own set. For instance, my mentor, he said, all judgment is self-judgment. The way that I'm judging everybody else is going to be a reflection of how I actually judge myself.
Yes.
Being able to reflect on using the information that an emotion is telling you, it's an indication of something that's going on within you. So being able to analyze that with others, which is why self is so limiting, because you don't know if you don't go outside of yourself. If you don't test that out in relationships, then you don't actually see it. For example, in coaching volleyball, I had a team who, they wouldn't play well when it was between me and my assistant coach. When I was sitting on the bench, they didn't do well. Now in practice, they killed it. They did amazing. And when I sat them down and asked them, what is it about when I'm on the bench you don't play well? It doesn't matter how I change the teams or how I switch up the dynamic. When I'm there, something changes. And they were like, well, coach, we'll be honest, these kids are like 13, 8th graders.
Yeah.
They're like, we can tell when you're upset, you don't say anything, but we can see it in your face. We can see it in your body language. You're showing that you're upset at how we're playing. And that was like, ooh, ouch, that hurt for me. And in reflection, I realized that I was putting the same pressure onto them that I had put onto myself as a child, because I had to go fast. And so I held myself to this high expectation. This is also what informs the perfectionist. This high expectation and pressure that was put on me from young, I was coaching from that standpoint because I play like that. I wasn't even able to feed into these girls to actually coach them from a place that was healthy or helpful for them because of what I had experienced in myself as pressure. I'm saying all that to say that asking who hurt you and how can also inform you in that same method that you're talking about, instead of what happened to you, asking who hurt you.
Absolutely.
And I like that question when you talk about what happened to you. And sometimes that can be a trigger for people, depending on how close something has happened to them, especially if it's something that's recent or it's still impactful in terms of grief. I would encourage everyone to think of every individual person in layers. No one's a flat plane. Now, I know that some of us get excited about being able to look at someone, watch a few behaviors, and think that we know them. If you think of them in layers, then you can be mindful that they've had something that's probably happened to them in the past. We all have things that they've had to work through, challenges that they've had to work through. And so I never think of this, and I'm going to use this word. I hate it when people use this word. No one's perfect. Everyone has something. And so keeping that in mind, you can be a bit more gentle with interacting with people, giving them an opportunity to get to know you so that you can get to know them. And we want to also be mindful that even if someone is from a specific culture, don't assume, because you don't know how far they delve into their culture. They may be more inclined to do other things. And it's a great opportunity to learn about people. And when you learn that they have layers and you get into a few of those layers, you're less likely to judge. And then if you see them a bit distressed, you're more understanding. And you can do that in the workplace as well.
Absolutely. They say the things that bother us the most about other people are the things that we need to work on. I think that says a lot about judgment and judging others and their behaviors. A lot of us, just based on what we've been through in life, sometimes we get used to the chaos, and it's hard to change the corner and get used to calm because we're so used to chaos. Do you agree, Dr. Thomas?
Oh, I agree. Listen, we talk about normalcy. And so we hear people kind of overuse the word normal. So sometimes our culture and society actually determines how we view what's normal. I like to think of someone being normal if their behavior and their interactions aren't disruptive in their life. If it's not disruptive to them, they've got good relationships, it doesn't disrupt them working or being productive, then it means it's just different. And I want to say difference does not equal deficiency. Sometimes it's just being different. But when we think about these past interactions in terms of relationships, that which we have become or come to think of as being normal may be quite dysfunctional for other people. And we want to understand, comes with that self-awareness, how what we are pressing out to others impacts them. Because I think that those dysfunctional behaviors can create chaos. If you try to get out of chaos, change your environment, change how you interact, be sure that you're not bringing the chaos with you, because what seems normal to you can be very disruptive to someone else.
What if you can't get out of the environment that you're in the chaotic environment? How do you manage that?
I think that it's important for others to find examples of what they're looking for. Sometimes that may be a teacher. Let's say if it's a child and it's a teacher that's kind and treats them well and they feel that they are appreciated and that they are loved, then you understand exactly what that feels like. So sometimes you can feel it before you can actually do it. If you have friends or a friend's family that is close and trusted by the family, that may be a way to get another example. But it's looking for examples and understanding how it should feel in a positive way, so you can then in turn know when you're getting it from someone else, this is what it should feel like.
Maya Angelou once said, "You may not always remember what a person said, but you'll always remember how they made you feel." And Oprah Winfrey also said the same thing. She grew up in kind of an abusive environment. Her grandmother was abusive, and her own parents really weren't in her lives when she was younger. But she remembers a teacher. She said a teacher was the one that made her feel like she was accepted and she was a person. And from that, she became kind of the person she is today. I feel like the people you surround yourself with and the mentors that you're able to get is really a big deal for a lot of people who can't change their course of environment. That was great. Do you have any input, Sky?
No, I think that's really good. To the best of your abilities, I think just finding stillness, if that's in another person, if that's in another environment, if that's by getting outside, just finding it in doses where you can. If you can only get that for 10 minutes, if you can only get that for 5 minutes, until you can get it long enough to embody it, so that you don't have to worry about the environment. But that may take time, especially if you're in that environment consistently. It's really difficult to heal from trauma surrounded by the triggers of it. I think finding moments of stillness where you can and not taking them for granted or taking advantage of them as often as possible until you can embody it is
Right.
another way to do that.
And I think it's also, we talk a lot about dissociation and it kind of being a bad thing, but sometimes it's good to dissociate and go into a meditation or take a step back away from things so that you can heal and do better. It's not all bad to dissociate from your circumstances or your environment.
And I would just say, just being mindful that that is something that is short term, because some
Yeah.
people, that becomes a coping strategy for them. Well, I'm just going to remove myself from it. And sometimes we need to engage again, so we don't have those little pebbles that we're building. But short term certainly can probably be helpful to someone.
Absolutely. I was saying earlier that when I was talking about the therapy and the benefits of therapy, how sometimes before you start therapy, you're walking down a 2-lane road. But once you start therapy, it's kind of like you're building a highway. You have more resources and more directions to go to cope with whatever you're going through at that time. And so I think that's how we have to look at our resources, is that 4-lane highway that we can use those resources to turn and make different routes and changes in our normal pattern of doing things versus how we used to do it. And every now and then we may revert back to those old ways, but there's always those new patterns that we've learned as well. This has been a great conversation, a lot of insight. I wish I was healthier, but I've learned a lot about a lot of things that y'all have talked about. So I just want to thank y'all so much for joining the Hey Girl podcast. Quick question before y'all leave, before we end today. Do you have any intentions for the month of October? What is something that you plan on doing or building on for next month, or even I guess next week? Next week is next month.
Go ahead.
Next month, I'm glad you mentioned my podcast. I'm going to be moving into a second season where I'm going to be doing some introductions with other people. I want to expand this idea of mastering. We may have ladies on talking about mastering motherhood, and it may be being a single mother, or you're a mother who's transitioned from work to home, or vice versa. But I'm going to be including some interviews with lovely ladies who are doing some things in terms of mastering elements in their life, some of the same things that we've all dealt with.
What's the name of your podcast?
Second, oh yes, the name of my podcast is Mastering Your Power with Dr. Rhonda. You can check that out on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple.
Awesome. And if they want to reach you on social media, how would they get in touch with you?
Certainly. You can follow me on IG at HT_masteries, and you are certainly welcome to have a consultation with me or to join one of my mastery programs at htmasteries.com. And again, the business is Harris Thompson Masteries.
Oh no.
Oh no, what happened?
I don't know where she went.
Well, we lost Dr. Thompson, but Sky, what about? Oh, here she's back. We lost you.
It passed out on me, but I was just giving the website is htmasteries.com.
Thank you so much. And what about you, Sky?
Something I'm looking forward to or building on. That's the question?
Yes.
Yes. There's been more speaking engagements and opportunities here in October. One being the Restoration Retreat, where we are doing a 3-day weekend or a few events over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and helping women restore and relax and get back to themselves. By God's grace, we've been able to put that together. That's going to be October 20th through the 22nd. And it's at the Restoration_retreat on Instagram for those who may want to attend. And then I'm in the middle of writing a book, which is something that I'm saying publicly to hold myself accountable to doing it.
I cannot wait to read it. Like, I'm excited about it already. So,
Thank you.
I need to mention one thing. I forgot. So my book will be released on Amazon next month, and it's called Mastering Your Power. So it's a brief guide that explains some of my tools, and it gives people who want that, tangible option to be able to go ahead and start making their notes and getting themselves together in terms of self-mastery. But that is next month. I'm sorry, so many wonderful things we've talked about today. I didn't even think about that.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Sky, how can we find you on social media?
I am at Skye, SKYE_GULLATT on everything. Or you don't even have to type the underscore. You could just put Skye Gillette. There's only one.
Much, ladies. I'm so glad we were able to have this discussion and join. Thank you for joining Hey Girl. Until next time.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to be on Hey Girl.
Hey Girl. See you later.